Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teens from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. And away we go. Here we are at the Principles of Performance podcast. I am your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my friend and co-host, Mike Perry. Mike, we got a good one today, buddy.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is one of those ones where I'm going to be taking a bunch of notes. And, my wife made sure that I asked good questions today because she is a big fan of Mark. So, no, we're excited about today.
Yeah. So Mark Fisher is an international speaker, consultant, and entrepreneur. Through keynotes, courses, and coaching, Mark helps gym owners achieve financial success and personal freedom. His popular topics include building cult-like cultures. I can't wait to dive into that. Time management and sales and marketing for just good human beings. And he's a proud alumni speaker of the TEDx Broadway. Mark and Mike Keeler founded Business for Unicorns, BFU, in 2016, and have since worked with many of the leading fitness studios across the country, UK and Australia, as well as Sony Music, Sylvan Learning, Novus Surgical, and Security Scorecard. In addition to all that, Mark is the co-founder of Mark Fisher Fitness, one of the most unusual gyms in the fitness industry, and it operates a physical location in midtown Manhattan and a fast-growing virtual location. And it was recognized in 2015 in Inc.'s 500 fastest growing companies in America, as well as Men's Health's top 20 gyms in America. And I met Mark and his staff when they came to a workshop at my old facility. So he stood out in that crowd, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him now. Great to have you here, Mark.
Yeah, an honor. Truly honored. It's been quite the roster y'all found this podcast. I feel honored to have the opportunity to join the esteemed ranks.
Well, you definitely earned it. And so let's dive right in talking about how, so now you hear like these big gym chains like Planet Fitness and what they're trying to do is market themselves in this niche for a gym for people who don't like going to gyms. But yes, you were doing that many, many years ago at your facility in New York City, except the only difference, you did it with a lot more substance. Talk about how you kind of landed on that particular niche.
Yeah. And a lot more crazy. So, that became my niche in part because I had been a professional actor and I was sort of living for a long time these kind of parallel lives. And then I was a professional actor, which not only was part of what I did professionally, but very importantly was my social community living in New York City, right? But concurrent to that, I was also a huge fitness nerd, like a real fitness nerd. And you all might know, oftentimes it is difficult to really chase two rabbits, and you tend to have people that are either, New York has a lot of people that are actors that like kind of do training, or they have trainers that like, I'm an actor. And I really kind of pride myself on doing both of those. But as happens, you get older, things evolve. Acting is awesome. There's some real challenging things about the lifestyle of being an actor that as I got a little older, I became a lot less interested in. And frankly, my intellectual interest and passion for fitness really just kept growing over time. And I kind of reached a certain inflection point where I saw, for me, the writing on the wall. I didn't want to be going out of town anymore to be, doing Cats the musical in the Midwest, which I do not judge. If any actors are listening, it's a great way to go. My wife is currently in her 9th Broadway show. I think it's a great career. But I just found myself very interested I was so passionate about fitness and so satisfied, frankly, with something with a much tighter feedback loop for impact, right? Which is not to say that theater or the arts don't have an important role to play in the society. I think that they do. But the helper high that you can get when you can really help someone feel better, move better, look better was very exciting for me. And also, I think as you alluded to, I'm like a nerd, right? It's like I'm really interested in fitness as a craft and as a practice. So long story short, when I decided I was going to go all in on training, it only made sense for me to work with my people, which were my friends, which, being New Yorkers, being people in the Broadway community, I knew that I had an opportunity to try to enrapture them, enroll them in an interest in the serious fitness, but do it in a way that they found funny and inclusive and irreverent. And that was sort of how Mark Fisher Fitness was born. So, I'll just say, for those that are not familiar with MFF, you can go to our Instagram page and you'll see many unusual things, and check out our website. But the shtick is ridiculous humans, serious fitness, which we really aspire to, right? Which is to say that we want a fitness experience that's unusual, that's funny, it's very colorful. We call our members ninjas. It's not a gym, it's the Enchanted Ninja Clubhouse and Glory of Dreams. But we really aspire to provide a really high quality training experience. It's always been important from day one that we really know what we're doing, that I'm living up to I think the model that is set by the mentors that I looked up to, many of which, have been guests on this particular show, so your listeners are familiar with. And I think that sort of brings us up to how MFF was born and sort of why it's this strange thing.
So the fitness industry is traditionally pretty dogmatic and cut and dry and sort of vanilla. And you've definitely made an impact, and you've made a change in that. So explain where fitness and fun meet.
Yeah, I think for me, there are two things. I think I'll say, first of all, there is a strategic conversation around very intentionally seeing an opportunity around how do I make something vanilla and make it unusual. If I'm being totally honest, part of it was I am just a very eccentric person, and like a misbehaving child, I just got in a very intense, tight feedback loop where the more I misbehaved and the more bizarre and eccentric I was, the more the community of people fanned the flames. So like the misbehaving child, I kept getting more and more feedback to be full mark, I might say. So, it's something I've thought a lot about over the years, but I think in the spirit of trying to do something that's a little bit less away from me weaponizing my middle school eccentricities and maybe a little bit more useful for people listening, to me, I've always been interested in taking the work seriously, but not taking myself seriously. And I think I've always come into this work, particularly with the type of people that I've historically worked with a lot of empathy for how confronting it is, and sort of what things people are coming in about their relationships with their body and with movement. And, particularly my population, although, even though a lot of them move really well, they maybe move well because their background is dancers, right? So these were not people that feel particularly comfortable or interested in being in a traditional weight room space. So I obviously have a very colorful approach. I think that's often I think can sometimes be a little bit of a trap if someone looks at MFF. They might, I think it can be easy to dismiss, and it's like, okay, well, they do that, and they're in New York, and by and large, that's true, right? You probably don't want the type of brand we have. I don't think it's going to fly in a lot of markets, but I think there's things about the way we've attempted to humanize the experience that I think most people can adopt, right? Because there does seem to often be a little bit of an inverse correlation. Not always, but oftentimes, you tend to have these personality styles that love precision, these like egghead rocket scientist types that may or may not be as proficient with understanding how to speak to a human and how to understand what's in it for them and what their interests are, and to step in their shoes of motion to understand what they might be going through to get here. And then the thing that's also, I think, maybe not thrilling is the individual that is super dynamic and they're very big picture and they really excite people, but they're not that interested in the position of the hip and a squat necessarily. And they don't really know the names of any bones, right? And, that is also not thrilling to me. So I think people listening, I assume, are likely, well, you're probably interested in the names of bones if you're listening to this podcast, and I salute you for that. And, I would invite you, and I assume you're probably already doing this, but just to, always remember we're really dealing with people first and foremost. So again, as far as like what fun it's going to look like, it'll be very different based on your culture. Certainly you have to consider, okay, who are the people that you're called to serve, who are the people showing up in your space? Because it's probably not going to be the way that MFF creates fun. But I do think being intentional about making the experience as enjoyable as you can is worthwhile, right? And the full disclosure, that will look very different based on your facility and your clients and your mission and values.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, and I'll reiterate again, like what you see is not a gimmicky thing that when you're seeing from Mark, and where some places it maybe it's not. There's a sense of genuineness in what you're doing, and that there's also I think something to be taken from all professionals, whether it's on the clinical side that we have as listeners, or even fitness professionals. And I think if there's any like take home lesson, is as much as we know and as much as we can have a tremendous impact, is that like at some point fucking get over yourself. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like people are here to work out. And I always say, like, we have one of the coolest jobs in the world, and that we can change lives, but we're not in the art or business of saving lives. Like if somebody clutches their chest, like if I'm teaching a class, somebody, I say, look, if somebody clutches their chest, don't say quick, no one's going to yell quick. Somebody grab a strength coach. You know what I mean? Like we don't have to have that. We're not running into burning buildings, but we can still have extremely meaningful impacts on lives. And so I think keeping that perspective is something you've done a really good job of. And then another thing to kind of lather up to you a little bit more is something that you're really good at is writing. And it's a lost art. I think, especially because everything has to be 60 seconds or even less for Instagram and TikTok. But in terms of doing my research for the show, looking back on some of the stuff you've written is very well done. And one of the things that stood out that I made as a note here is you said you can learn a lot about a human being by how they train. So explain to everybody what you mean by that.
Yeah, my gosh. Well, this is so interesting too, having run a facility for a long time and having had the opportunity to hire a lot of clients, is I think you'll learn a lot about a human by the way they train, right? I think we bring a lot of our personality quirks, strengths, weaknesses into the way we approach training, right? And I think this can be encapsulated perhaps by the Zen koan, how we do anything is how we do everything, right? You have some people that are going to go in super hard, but they're not necessarily thoughtful about the position of their body, and they're not really considering, the fact that we're looking in many situations with fitness, for most of us, most of the time, we're looking to provide a stimulus to create some sort of like outcome. Right now, again, I make space for there's a certain type of person that loves the actual physical exertion of it. That's their own kind of kink, which also, you support that. That's totally great. But I do think, there's people in the world, there's a little bit of recklessness the way they approach training that, again, I'm not making this right or wrong, but I just think it's an interesting observation, right? I think on the other hand, too, there's people that maybe seem have a very hard time really pushing it as hard as they could, right? Or maybe like a little careful, and it feels like a little precious. And, I think one of the greatest, most hilariously generic pro tips that you can give anybody that works as a fitness professional is rep out your clients sometimes. Rep them out, because my gosh, you're always going to have that client. They're like, oh, how hard was that set? Oh, like 9 out of 10. Okay, cool. Let's rep out on this next one. Oh, it's funny. You felt that 12 reps were 9 out of 10, but you just did 37. You just did 37 when I made you rep out, right? So at any rate, it's something I think about a lot. And admittedly, the full disclosure is these days I'm not on the floor. I haven't been in sort of several years. So the first to admit, I feel like perhaps demyelinated from some of those skill sets, but that was very much my experience as a trainer. Is you learn a lot about people, about how they show up under stress. Because for me, maybe a final comment I'll make, one of the things I'm most interested in about training is you're essentially practicing, I think at best, you're practicing showing up with consciousness and grace and awareness in a physically difficult situation, right? And life is defined by these constant opportunities to ideally grow through adversity. And I think one of the benefits of fitness is you are practicing doing hard things. And there's something to be said for, I'll say I am endlessly fall in love with people that put themselves in that situation over and over and choose to show up with real awareness in it. And again, they're finding the line, right? They're neither they're not taking the foot off the gas pedal, but they're also not wild about it. They're just like in it, and they're there and they're present. And there's a lot of physiological benefits of fitness, and obviously I'm an advocate for them as well. But my gosh, like the psychological benefit of learning how to experience discomfort and just be in it and still show up and do the work. You guys are, familiar with this phrase, kalostenos, right? This concept of like beautiful strength, right? The etymology of the word calisthenics is how do I create beautiful strength under adversity? And to my mind, I think that's maybe like kind of the foundational model for how I think about fitness and the potential psychological impacts it can have on people.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about how people get their fitness information nowadays, which is very different from when you and I met. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep, I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep going back to this kind of
Yeah.
this balancing act that you have, where you've been able to leverage kind of the curb appeal or click appeal of showing off kind of eye-catching physiques or anything like that
Yeah.
in your promotions and content, but yet you're still able to back that up with credibility and actually knowing your shit and not just being
Yeah.
a quote unquote influencer. Kind of talk about how you get good information out there that actually gets seen, but doesn't sell your soul to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And, and I think I should also concede before I dig into this that it is very true that, frankly, I got started very different time in the industry. I'm like barely even on Instagram. So, I probably can't say at this point that I can give you like, oh, here's the 1, 2 thing to be an influencer. But my professional expertise remains gyms, right? I work with gyms, which are not people that are going to have, a $500,000 following to do sponsorship deals. These are people that need to, in most situations, gain a stable of like 100 to 300 clients that are paying a decent rate per month and are sticking around and are getting good results and creating a good life, right? I think at a high level, it's cliche, but I think the best way to think about this remains that you have to give people what they want, or you have to sell people what they want, and then you have to give them what they need, right? And in fitness land, again, I think we go back to this challenge. Sometimes we can run to a little bit of the curse of knowledge, where the intellectual interests and passions and fascinations of the practitioner can create blind spots, right? Where we're interested in the things that we're interested in. We're like, and again, I'm not to say there's no place for that, but I think if you're looking to create a big boat, I think it's important to always stay at the forefront of your mind what it is that the person you're feeling called to serve, what's the conversation going on in their head, right? And that's an old cliche marketing term, but like what it is that they're struggling with, what are their short-term wants, what are their short-term frustrations, what are their long-term dreams, what are their long-term fears, and really making sure that you're speaking to that in the marketing and making that an okay thing while trusting yourself as a professional to move them, up the motivational spectrum to things that are a little bit more sustainable, right? So a very specific example, right, in fitness land. Quite often when people are getting started, we want, like practitioners, you want people that are focused on the things that they want. You want people that are focused on the positive way that's going to change their life. And like, that's all cool. And that's just not where most people start, right? Negativity bias is a thing. When most people start, they're not thinking about getting from A to B. They're just thinking like, I'm not A, this isn't me. I can't even tell you B, I just know that it's not A and I don't feel good, right? And I think that's an okay place to start. Now, I think where the long-term practitioners have it correct is if you study human motivation, that will tend to not be the most sustainable thing. But I think it's important to not make that wrong. If people start with quote unquote shallow goals, if they're starting from a place of like, I just don't want this anymore. Well, I'll tell you what, the things we don't want can be, I think, sometimes a pretty good, they can really incentivize starting, right? Like get the party started, right? And then a friend of mine, Coach Steve Ledbetter, who's like a motivational science guy, always talked about the positive motivational hot tub, right? So we start by selling them on the things they want, talking about the things they care about. So here's a micro example of this, right? I have no problem using the word toning. I have no issue with using the word toning because it's what a lot of the clients are thinking about, right? Now, again, if I get them into my world, at a certain point, I want to educate them, right? I want to explain to them that, like in practice, I know what you mean when you say that, but like you can't really like tone a muscle. You can burn fat, you can build muscle, right? I'll leave aside like super nerdery, and I was just a desire to discuss myogenic tone, but I know what they're saying when they say toning, right? And I'm comfortable I think using some of those terms and selling the things they want, because I know that once I get them in there, I hope to inspire them to make this a lifestyle and start to move them towards in the direction of who they want to be and what fitness can create for them. And I think the last thing I'll say is I think there is room for reasonable people to debate about where that line is, right? Because frankly, when you think about like marketing, there probably is there are certain things that you can do that will work that for me are going to be too far, right? They're going to be like, that's like actually too far. That's actually we're lying now, right? And I'll say there's room for reasonable people to disagree on this, but I do think if you're a trainer or if you're a gym owner, the thing you just always have to remember is, particularly the client that's not with you yet, the conversation they're having in their head is definitely not going to be that sophisticated. And to your point, Eric, it's going to be less sophisticated than it's ever been because they're getting so many mixed messages. And I don't know, it's hard to say, are things really worse than they were 10 years ago? I don't know. It seemed pretty bad 10 years ago. Maybe it's a different forms of, it's no longer just books and Oprah and newsstands. Now we also have social media. But I think regardless, the solution remains the same, which is like sell them what they want and then, be a pro, be a practitioner, give them what they need. And then also teach them what to want, right? Over time, teach them, help them, model for them values and a way of doing this that's sustainable, that, is reflective of good processes.
All right, so sort of changing gears a little bit, and I want to use the term experience because obviously with what you've created, it is an experience. And what are you trying to create when someone walks into Mark Fisher Fitness or any other club that you've consulted with? Like, what is the goal when someone walks through those doors?
Yeah, I mean, I just want them to feel welcome. That's the main, like, I'm just obsessed about that. I just want to be a good host, right? That's another one I think about customer service in general, even for gyms. A lot of it is just be a great host. Like if somebody walks in your house and you're having a party, you want to greet them. You want to greet them by name. You want them to have, and again, this is going to look different based on the culture, right? So, MFF is obviously very colorful, but in practice, a lot of our SOPs around customer service are pretty rip-offable, right? That's not going to be that different, right? Simple things like if you have a front desk staff or however you do it, even if you have I have a small group personal training gym in North Jersey now, a very different model. It's Alloy Personal Training from Rick Mayo, I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Listen, I got a box, right? It's like a 1,500 square foot box, lean model. There's not a front desk person per se, but the same system of, if we operationalize this, it's you and or your staff should be looking at that booking billing platform and become experts in your clients so you know who's coming in, so you can greet them enthusiastically by name as soon as they walk in the door. Like that's the game, and that's like such a simple way to operationalize this, because that's the thing that we're looking to create, is people feel like welcomed and cared for and seen. And, for some people, it's probably more or less necessary. Certainly, if you're talking about populations that feel more inherent discomfort in these spaces, it probably becomes more important. But in practice, it's just good customer service, right? Just something like figuring out what are the systems that make the people feel like, I genuinely, sincerely care about you. You actually matter to me. And it's important to me that you're here, and I'm appreciative you're here, because I don't take it for granted that you could be somewhere else. And I want to express that love and care via systems, right? And again, I don't know that it's necessary for this rabbit hole, but I'll just again highlight, you can also operationalize that, right? Because in theory, that can sound kind of academic, but there are actually things you can create for the standard operating procedures, which I would note, if you're a one-on-one trainer doing your own thing, probably not a bad idea to get this down on paper for you. What are like the handful, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 things that make a great session, that every time I know if I do this, it's going to create a great outcome? And to state the very obvious, if you ever want to have people work for you, if you run a gym, if you're a fitness manager, that's the type of thing that you have to make crystal clear for the people you work with. And then, of course, train them and manage them and audit them and all that other stuff.
Now, where I think there's something really important in that messaging that you're saying, Mark, is that's something the kind of the cultural macro that we do a really shitty job of in the fitness industry, even in just as patrons, and we don't have a good perspective of that as fitness professionals, because we're so comfortable in the gym, because we grew up in the gym. That's why we're drawn to this as a profession, and we forget how uncomfortable the average person is walking in there. And so there's a story I always think of, that one of the college athletes I was working with came in and he said, "Coach, there's this big fat guy who's at my gym, and all he does is lift. He never goes on the treadmill. And should I tell him that he needs to do cardio?" And I told the kid, "Look, here's what you need to do. If there's a big fat guy in your gym, that guy's winning, and we need to keep him there." I said, "So whatever your whole job with him is, every time he walks in the door, smile, make him feel comfortable, and talk to him, make him feel at home there. And that is the best thing you could do for that guy. I don't give a shit what he does. He's there. He's winning."
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's so true. It's, it's funny because we had, so the Unicorn Society, which is our coaching group for gym owners, we had our virtual treat this past Friday, and we brought in Mike Boyle to do the keynote. And, Mike's obviously a super smart guy. And I don't think I had realized this, but he gave a talk on hiring trainers. And he was talking about a couple people he had hired who had been clients first, right? And you think of Mike Boyle strength and conditioning, you think of their legendary internship. A lot of people were interns first, right? And one of the I can't remember this young lady's name that he was talking about. He said the same thing. She came to the gym multiple times and like circled around and was afraid to come in, right? And you're like, wow. And this is like at Mike Boyle strength and conditioning, and this is someone who even went on to become a trainer. But yeah, it's just so hard, I think, to keep in mind how difficult this can be for so many people, particularly for a lot of people in the fitness industry, right? And for me, I think that certainly was an advantage. You kind of have these essentially two kind of parallel tracks where you have people that get in this industry oftentimes because they have a sports background or athletics background, they're interested in sports. And this is almost a way of extending this very positive emotional valence that they have from like movement, weight rooms, and then you have the other, crew, which is, personified by the skinny Charles Atlas getting the sand kicked in his face because he's too skinny around the girl, and for me, because I came from that background of being like painfully skinny and feeling very, very intimidated when I started in gyms, which, at this point, that was a long time ago. I think that has been helpful to me. But one thing, a point I often make when I'm talking to gym owners and trainers about this that I think is important to remember is I would say you almost are more risk if you're in my half of the industry, because in practice, you became a trainer, right? You opened up a gym. So at this point, there's, I think, maybe even more of a risk to forget how hard it is for this new person because you're not this person, right? By definition, you did figure it out, right? So I think it's a constant practice to go back to putting yourselves in the emotional shoes of the person that's coming in, right? And the final thing I'll say about this is none of this is I'm not trying to fragilize people, right? That's another thing I don't want to say too. I don't want to say like, oh, people are so precious and like, oh, they're so broken and afraid. It's like, no. Like, that's like why people are not broken. Like, that's not, I reject that. So people are awesome. People are great. They're going to be more cool when they work out more regularly. And they've got stuff going on, right? So again, I don't mean to sound like people are like so precious and so freaked out and so anxious that like, you have to kid glove everybody. I don't think that's it either. But I do think, a little bit of grace, a little bit of thoughtfulness, a little bit of extra care and warmth will go a long way. Because if I give you one other thing, this is like so money that I think too, when I think about hiring trainers or effective staff, right? I think this is good to think of if you're a personal trainer. When someone is considering working with you, they're kind of looking at two things immediately. We kind of keep going back to this dichotomy here, right? It's like warmth and competence, right? If you're competent, but you're not warm, I find I'm suspicious of you. You're not relatable. I think you're like an alien. I don't feel emotionally safe with you. I'm actually kind of looking to poke holes of what you're doing. So if you're all competence and power, it's important, I think, to soften that with a little bit of warmth, a little bit of relatability, right? On the other hand, if you're all warmth, but you don't seem competent, you're going to lose a lot of people. And there's a certain type of person that doesn't care about the details. Going to be like, wow, you're friendly and okay, I guess you're not like too bad and that's fine. But if you want to be very successful in this industry, if you can learn how to both be very good at the job, to be competent, to be comfortable, to speak well, and then importantly, also be friendly, be likable, right? Like we talked about this weekend with Mike Boyle, right? Like read How to Win Friends and Influence People. Both of those things matter, right? Because when I'm hiring people, particularly a place like MFF, or if anybody is running a gym or works in a gym setting, to the extent that a wide percentage of the human race can feel pretty comfortable with you pretty quickly and gets the sense that you're pretty competent, you know what you're talking about, that's it, baby. Like that's gasoline, like light your career on fire. You can do anything, right? And if you're not happy with going on with your career, I think it's worth considering both of those pieces, right? Do you really have the skills to pay the bills? Or, and I hate to say it, skills to pay the bills is part of the marketing job too. Right. That's like its own like kind of art, because I do think there's something said for learning how to position yourself in a way that people have a sense like, okay, this person is legit, that they know what they're talking about. Because we know the end consumer doesn't actually know that, right? And I'll resist to go on rabbit holes there around the proxies and signals you can learn to drop into your work as a trainer to help instill a sense that you're credible. And if you're an asshole, it's not going to matter. No one's going to want to be around you.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show.
There's one thing, because I own a business as well, and do the hiring, and a big part of what I've noticed is that it's the same thing, the same rapport that you develop with your clients or potential clients. It's the exact same situation as your coaches, and a big part of it, from what I've really learned, is that if you really want to get into the business of developing really good, competent coaches that are both good at what they do, but also just genuine human beings, it starts with the genuine human being. That's what I found is we can teach them how to coach, right? But if you can find a genuinely good human being that wants to help people and they're willing to put the time in to learn the science, man, that is literally that is a recipe for being the top 2%. I mean, it's
100%.
And it's not that hard, which is crazy. It's like, be nice and be competent. Isn't that crazy that that's the standard we have in the industry?
Yeah, it really is, and it's interesting too, because, I've worked with a lot of trainers over this year, right? And, one thing I'll say is a point of continued fascination for me. And I think a real weakness I have, like post-COVID, I think a real weakness is, I will say I'm always interested in the trainer that is a wonderful person that really cares and really wants to do a good job. And for my taste, being actual like a secret fitness dickhead over here, I can't seem to get them where like I want them to go. And the reality is, if you own a gym, that's part of the benefit. Ideally, you have some rocket scientist-y types that are overseeing the program design. You want to teach them like enough about human movement that they're good enough. And it is interesting, right? It's fascinating to me sometimes where people like I've worked with them, like, wow, you're such a wonderful person. And like, again, for my taste, which are probably like unnecessary, right? Frankly, I'm probably too much of a nerd at times, as far as I'm like, oh, what's going on with the right foot's kind of collapsing over there. But if I had to choose, I'm going with the friendly person all day long, every day, particularly in our models. It's like you said too, Eric, it's like, this is not actually like rocket science, right? Like, and again, I hope it's clear. I'm both speaking outside both sides of my mouth here, listeners, but I'm sort of massaging this dichotomy because on some level, again, I don't work with like Division I athletes. It's like, don't hurt them, have fun. Don't hurt them, have fun, right? The longer I've been in the game, I've sort of like passed out of my, I definitely went through, as I'm sure many people listen, maybe or maybe not. I don't, maybe I'm just a dickhead, but I definitely went through like my angry young man phase where like nothing was like good enough for me. I was like very like judgmental. And the longer I've been in the game, I'm like, you know what? The minimum effective dose that people get from human movement from just doing something is so low that like I become so agnostic. Like, and listen, I have strong opinions about how to do things. I think some things are clearly better than others, right? So hierarchies do exist. I'm not saying like it's all the same. But for general population individuals, like the most important variable is likely going to be compliance, right? Now, again, I know because of our backgrounds, obviously avoiding injury is also like a very big thing, right? So I do think, again, I don't mean to sound like technique doesn't matter, because if you're putting, if you're imposing loads on someone's body, I do think at a certain point, I'm going to start to not have like the most patience if there's no attempt to care about what's going on in that musculoskeletal system, particularly because those sorts of injuries are pernicious, right? They show up in a longer feedback loop. And I think if we're all trying to live, I hope, to 100 years old, well, your orthopedic health is something that really like I care about a lot. It's like funny, we always joke at MFF. It's like, no one at MFF's ever going to get up in your face like, you better lift more weights. Like, we'll get up in your face and be like, you better honor your long-term orthopedic health. And when your spine is out of position, you better terminate the set so you can lift a long time. Which, it's kind of a different vibe.
All right. So there's something I mentioned earlier in the bio that I said I couldn't wait to get to. And that's where you talk about you building a personal tribe and like almost cult-like followings, not only for yourself, but the businesses that you coach. How do you do that? Like, what are some of the steps we can take as coaches or facility owners or people trying to gain a bigger brand awareness?
Yeah, I think there are two pieces to this. I think one can be operationalized, and the one I think is like a little harder. And I think you can improve, but is maybe there or not. I think the operational piece is all just the cliche, boring, soft, quote unquote, business stuff, which is like, are you very clear on who you help? And are you obsessed with that type of person and helping that kind of person have a great experience, get great results? So I think the clearer you are on who it is you're looking to serve, and importantly, the clearer you are on your values and what is true for you and what are the guardrails and what you will do and what you will not do on the path of servicing these people, I think that's kind of the foundation, right? And I think in the fitness industry, there's a lot of Me Too kind of stuff. And I think if you really want to succeed, I think the clearer you are in who you're looking to serve, the better off you'll be. And I think this is challenging too, because I think, it's a great problem we have in today's day and age where information is so widely distributed, but sometimes it's hard to unpack, like, is this the right context for this? Because niches are certainly in the riches are in the niches, but in practice, you can only niche down so far if you have a geographically constrained gym. Like a lot of people, your listener, again, like I'm a brick and mortar guy. I won't even work with you if you're an online coach. Like read my stuff, you'll find valuable things, but I'm not your guy, right? That's not the world that I know. So I think the first step of developing a cult-like following is clarity on who it is you're looking to attract, clarity on how you're going to deliver them, what are the values, what are things that are true for you and true for your business. And then if I were to add a third piece, it's again, this is a term I keep using, operationalize it, right? And that's a fancy term. It just means, are you turning these lofty ideas into actions that exist in time? And are there specific ways of auditing to make sure that's happening, right? And I think, great customer service is going to be a big piece of this. I will say this, there's a second piece of this, which I alluded to, which is maybe a little bit harder to turn to SOPs. And that, brings to mind the phrase, are you the person that the people you're looking for are looking for, right? Which is to say, are you modeling and leading from the front? Is there something about you that is attractive to the people that you're looking for? And I thought a lot about this because, listen, it's hard to have a cult without some kind of cult leader. And different people just have more or less chops here, right? There's somebody said for some people just have a lot of energy. They've got main character energy, right? Main character energy also means you're not for everyone. You're polarizing, right? Like I have a lot of things I do not well. I'm very painfully aware of this point in my life, but I do know that I have a strong personality. I know I'm not for the people that I'm not for. The people that are into it are into it, right? So I do think there's maybe a second piece of this that has to do with one's own commitment to your own personal growth and development, your comfort in your own skin, your willingness to really be human with other people, and to walk the talk. And again, that's going to look very different based on the business, based on the the industry, the model. But I think that I just want to briefly say there's another piece to this. I think it's like a little bit hard. I'm like, just like roll out those SOPs. Like if you are a fitness professional, and I don't mean to sound harsh, it's going to maybe sound like harsh. So follow me on this because I'm not making this like a judgment. But if you're a fitness professional and like you talk like this and like you're just kind of like very low energy and your energy is like 2 out of 3 and your face doesn't move. And again, I'm not saying like be me, like I'm a strong cup of tea. It's not for everybody, right? It's like, I get that. I'm not trying to say that, but I am saying that there is, if you really want to build a business, either as a trainer that really develops a strong community of people that are like really into your stuff, or as a leader that builds a business and really shines a flag about like, here's help me find the others. Here is who we are looking for. Here is who we are. Here is who we stand for. I do think there's something to be said about your own personal development growth journey to bring forward whatever the authentic version of you is that is really showing up as a beacon, as a leader. And again, I think there probably are things I could probably offer that people could look into, which are maybe beyond the scope of this conversation. But at the very least, I think the first half of what I talked about is doable, right? So clear avatar, clear who you help, how you help them, clear values, and then what does that look like in the standard operating procedures? And I want to hammer this again, even if you're a one-on-one trainer, you can do this. You're only going to benefit if you make the things that maybe you're already even doing, make those things explicit, write them down, put them down on paper, and I think you'll be more consistent, even more effective.
So I want to run with this a little while if you're up for it. Is that
yeah.
Mike and I, we've talked about this for ourselves and what we're doing. And challenge of building that tribe and doing it when you look and see, and we're trying to study the science of what works, especially in this social media driven world. What you see, what works is the contrarian for the most part, and you've done it by being a contrarian in a positive way. But most of people that are getting the real follows and the clicks are contrarian just like literally just being an asshole all day, and just really just kind of going against the grain.
I struggle with that.
And so it's like, do I take that Matrix blue pill and just say, I'm just going to go out with a fucking fire hose to everybody that I think is shit out there? Or like, do I just stay the course and stay true to who we are? And like, we're just good guys who know a lot of shit that could give you a lot of value. And I don't want to build my brand on being an asshole.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I think about this a lot. It's like funny. I'm rereading Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets. It's interesting because one of the things that they're very much a proponent of in that world is like, find the biggest player in your space and just throw rocks as hard as you can. And I'm just like, no, I don't care. My people will find me. That's just not how I want to show up in the world. Like, listen, and I'm sure somebody could give like a very high integrity, mission-driven argument for that approach. I just think there's enough division in the world, right? And listen, common enemy is a great way. If you're just about growing your business, like common enemy is a great way to do it, right? Find enemies, because then you're basically saying like, oh, if you hate this person, well, I hate this person, so you must like me. Like, I guess that's the way to do it. I just want to live in that world. I don't want to live in that society. I'd rather make less money. I'm common, so it's common enemy. I'm common humanity all day long, baby. Like all day long, I'm common humanity, right? Even if you don't like me, I don't care. I like you. I'm gonna like you no matter what you do. Even if I'm not for you, I'm gonna like you, and I'm gonna want good things for you, right? But you're very much right. I mean, there is a marketing conversation with social media. It's very true, and probably a lot of it goes back to negativity bias, right? It's like things that outrage gets shared, right? And I don't want to participate in what I think has been a very unhelpful and negative thing that's happened in our society. I think a lot about, but I want to be very clear. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think there's probably a case to be made for it. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I love to throw rocks at people, like, I guess that's okay. I just also, for me, there's something about how I want to show up in the world, who I want to have been on my deathbed. And it doesn't include that, right? And it's not to say that like I'm never critical, but I've always attempted to, because clearly I have strong opinions, right? So clearly there's things I think is dumb and bullshit. But when I feel that in myself, that's just not reflective of my best version of me. And one of my mentors, Ari Weinzweig, always says, when you get curious, get curious. So if I'm getting triggered mad about something, I'm going to ask myself, okay, what is there? There's a value being violated there, right? And then I want to focus on hold the other side of the stick and be like, okay, well, what am I for? What is the thing that's being offended here, right? Warren Buffett always talked about, praise in public or praise specifically and criticize generally. Because like I criticize stuff all the time, right? I have very strong opinions. My life is in the business of fitness space. There's a lot of things I see that like I don't like, but I also just think for me, if it's actually making me genuinely mad and it's not just like naked strategy, okay, well then there's something for me to heal. There's something for me to work on. One, and if it is naked strategy, I don't know. It's just not the one that I feel good about. So that's just like my personal 2 cents. I don't know. I endorse that as advice, but that's how I think about that.
Yeah, it was funny. I remember I was, going back and forth with someone on Instagram a while ago, and we were talking about, I was going to write some articles for them and contribute to their site. And they said, well, you just need to just write a lot. Your content's good, but you need to be more controversial. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And that was kind of the end of it, because I decided like I didn't want to make a name for myself by just stirring the pot and just being a dick. And that was something that I consciously decided to do. But anyways, that's another story. But so tell us, we're going to change directions a little bit. The public eye views coaches, trainers, fitness professionals in kind of an interesting way. Sometimes we get looked down upon. What are some things that we can do as coaches to improve sort of our value, if you will, in the world of health and wellness and fitness?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? It's, and it's been a very interesting, I suspect we're all probably like around the same age, and we've had such a weird journey, right? Such a weird journey. When you think about the way people looked at trainers, in like the late 90s or like the early aughts, it's like, wow, wow, wow. Like I hope we've made some progress since then, but it's true, right? Because I want to, let's like name this out. Like a lot of people, if unless you go on to either be an educator or a gym owner or something else, this is a real issue. I'll tell you, even for gym owners, right? Because if you have a 31-year-old, making okay money, working all the hours, and they're single, they're king of the world, right? They're pumped about like their life. You're in your, early 40s and you're quote unquote just a trainer. You're not always feeling great about that over the holiday dinner when your family's asking about what you're doing, right? So I think there's a few pieces to this. I mean, certainly this is a reflection of probably the industry being young and there being an opportunity for this to become I don't want to say it's not a real career now to become, I think, more of a real career. I think the professionalization of fitness is valuable and can be valuable. I think we've seen a lot of progress there. And then, of course, the caveat to that is, apparently this is the theme of our conversation here, is, we don't want to professionalize to the point of excluding like being humans and actually servicing people, right? Because if we get too like clipboard, like I'm basically like a doctor, like I don't know that's always the most helpful to help the most people with fitness, because fitness is so confronting and scary to begin with for a lot of people. So I think, that's maybe one piece of it. I think frankly, part of the challenge is, and this is the thing, I don't know, we have like 100% great solves right now, there are some constraints on most, like if you're going to be a personal trainer and that is the thing that you're committed to doing, there are going to be some professional constraints on that, right? And listen, that could be a great way to go. I think we all know there are absolutely people that are just, and again, I don't mean this just in a derogatory way. I say that merely, right, a personal trainer in your 50s and 60s, and you're good with that. But in practice, it's one of the tough things about this industry is a lot of physically when the job is going to get done. If you're doing in-person stuff, it's before work, it's after work, it's on the weekends, right? So it's very hard to do this for long haul if you're just doing training, if you don't either open up a gym or become an educator or start doing online stuff. I will say this, I also, this may be provocative for somebody that owns a brick and mortar gym. It's part of what I actually don't mind about the advent of online stuff, right? Because I don't see any of online stuff as real competition to the in-person thing. I think it's just like a different kind of solution that optimally means more people are going to have more kinds of solutions, which is super cool. Now, full disclosure, and this, I don't know if any of you have like wounds about this. This is definitely like a, not wounds, that's dramatic, but it is a little bit of a navigation. Now, 10 years ago, you didn't have that with your trainers, right? 10 years ago, you weren't worried about your trainer being like, all right, well, I want to give you this, but also I want to do online training. And it's also going to be some of your clients, but now they want to do online training with me. And it's like that, is I think probably a whole separate podcast. Cause I think there are ways to navigate that can be, supportive of each other while respecting the boundaries and constraints of the business relationship of being in a gym. So, I don't know if I'm coming to like a great answer here on this, but I guess if I had to say anything, I think it's, continuing to professionalize the industry in the good ways and not the negative ways, and beyond people's perceptions of the job of personal trainer, continuing to work with a business model that makes it doable, right? Because the other thing is, I'll tell you, as a guy that coaches gym owners, not every trainer should be a gym owner, right? It's one of the challenges we have in the industry, because you get to that point and you're like, okay, I don't want to be doing this anymore. Not every bartender, like, I don't want to be bartender anymore. Doesn't mean you should open up a bar. Very, very, very different job, right? And sometimes that happens where you see the person, you're like, oh, you should not have done this actually, because now you're not even get to do the thing that you like and you're good at. You're doing these other things you don't like and you're not good at. And you may or may not be interested in getting better at those things. And maybe you're willing to, because the incentive is there, because there is a financial and professional upside that you might have if you run a gym. But I'm adamant, and this is to my disincentive as somebody that coaches gym owners, I'm adamant the solution is not that everybody should become gym owners, right? Because it is a very different job that's not to everybody's cup of tea. But hopefully, I'll say this, if we have better and better gym owners, I think that can contribute, because better gym owners can create better jobs, and I think more professional careers with benefits and longevity and paid vacation. And then importantly, hopefully, certainly what I aspire to as somebody that runs a business that realizes that, this is like, I'm not Google, right? You're amazing. I can't be like, oh, you're amazing. I'm going to transfer you from marketing. I'm going to send you you're going to go to work in Asia and understand the legal departments. I'm going to, like, I don't have that. So the other thing that I have attempted to do, which I don't know if this speaks to this particular question, but I think this is something to think on if you have the opportunity to manage or lead people, of like, I try to make it really okay that people are probably not going to be with me for forever, right? Like, my intention for people when they work with me is I want them to become a better professional and develop some skill sets. And I want them to be a better human, right? I think that's kind of a bold claim. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. Like, again, like I'm definitely not without my challenges, but we have attempted to create, particularly with MFF, an organization. The focus of the organization is that we become better, stronger, more expressed versions of who we are in the service of other people, which is, broadly created by having these helpful tensions with the people that we work with, and then having very difficult and direct conversations with each other, which again, it's probably its own separate podcast. So unfortunately, I don't think I got around to any good answers for like, this is how we help solve this thing, but it's something I think a lot about, and hopefully there are some things I shared that could be useful.
Well, definitely, as you're talking about the trainer who tries to be the owner when they shouldn't be, I feel not only you're talking to me, but at me. I had my facility for 12 years, and it was always trying to fit that square peg in the round hole. And it was one of the reasons that I stepped away, is that once I got to the point where I built it to the point where I wanted to, it was like, I could either be more of a gym owner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'm like, I don't want to be this anymore, that's not what I got into this for. But kind of circling back to Mike's question in terms of how we're viewed, I think it's even more challenging now in the social media world, because there's always a low bar for entry, right? Anybody could go get a certification in a weekend and get an iron on their back that says trainer. But now you could be an influencer without ever having trained anybody other than yourself. And so with that, that comes with that, it comes a lowering of that public persona. Like, we had Alan Cosgrove on a couple of weeks ago, and he said, like, look, if you watch CSI or a show like that, and you see there's a personal trainer as one of the side characters, he's the killer. So let's go back to something you just kind of dropped in there about the world of virtual and online training, which is still, and really this whole industry is in its infancy. So that's maybe some of the reason why we get this label on us. But where do you see the virtual and online thing going, as well as anything else you kind of see with the crystal ball in the next couple of years?
Predictions are difficult. I do think that the online option is going to be a good solution for a lot of people. And I'll say this, I don't know a lot, and I don't really know enough to have predictions of what that actually means for the end user, because I think there is a flood towards online training that, again, I'm really over my skis here. This is not a world I know, but I wonder if every trainer now is looking to go online, does that chop it all up like too much, where now there's like so much competition for online training? Because everybody wants to work from their underwear and not have to ever do sessions in person, and certainly not doing the hours they used to. I think as always, people that are super good at what they do and also get good at sales and marketing, which is that's a big piece of it, are going to thrive. I think this is maybe a charitable interpretation, but something that maybe could happen here, and I think you're seeing this a very little bit in the in-person boutique fitness space, is if we have, and I think we have, not the society writ large, right? So let's leave aside, there's a massive percentage of the population that doesn't work out, doesn't have any interest. That's a whole separate conversation, right? But of the people that have been working out, the reality is, although there's a lot of like bad information, a lot of influencers, there's also like a lot more good information than was there. And maybe it's a little bit of luck to find yourself in the right internet rabbit holes to get exposed to good information. But I don't know. I mean, the reality is, I don't know, for instance, okay, like online training in a vacuum is the best solution for someone that's never done in-person training, right? So I don't, I think it's going to be hard more often not to be like really well accomplished at that. But I'll say this, if you've been in a pretty good gym and you've got some pretty good coaching, at a certain point, I say this like speaking for myself, it's kind of my preferred solution at this point, right? Like I will usually I almost always have a coach I'm working with. I'm always outsourcing my own programming because like I can't be trusted. If I design my own program, I cannot be trusted because I'm always like second guessing and like, do I do another set here or blah, 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 blah. So, I could see a world where at least in the corner of industry, people that are fitness aware because of the advent of easy tech solutions. There's so many apps now that even 10 years ago we didn't have where you can, leverage some scale to do program design. I like to think this could be a good solution, at least to get pretty good programming out there for people that don't necessarily need the in-person coaching, which may or may not be paired with behavior change and accountability coaching, which is, of course, of its own separate piece. So I don't know. I'm optimistic about it. I think that part of the industry will continue to grow. Right. It's probably fair to note again. This is different than Peloton. I think you're going to see some Uber tech super scaled solutions, which will have some massive pros and some other things they probably don't do as well. But I think, if you think about, this is maybe too crude of a model, but if you think about what people are looking for training, it's like a good program design, good technical coaching so that I'm performing it well, and then just accountability behavior change. With online programming, you do lose a lot of the in-person stuff. And again, and maybe you're doing videos, and I'm sure there's ways around it. Again, that's not really outside my world. That sounds onerous. But if you have somebody that knows how to train well enough and they just want good programming and somebody to talk to and somebody to look at them, like, I think that can be valuable, right? I'm a big believer in coaching in general, right? It's the Hawthorne effect, right? Like when someone's looking at you, necessarily that usually means like I'm literally in real time looking at you doing your squat and now you're doing better because there's an awareness that's valuable. But I also think knowing somebody's going to be looking at either your food logs or checking in your workouts or just shooting an email being like, hey, I noticed you didn't fill out your such and such. I think that can be valuable for a lot of people. So that's maybe a little Pollyanna-ish, but my hope is just more people getting help with a different solution that we didn't used to have.
Yeah. So, you mentioned online training, and obviously when COVID hit, everybody went to online training because there was really no other options. And, now we're sort of on the other side of it as someone who does have a brick and mortar business. I am so happy to not be doing any type of online training or any of that. I hate online training. I would so much rather be hanging out with people. And it's funny because I've spent probably 20 years trying to get more science and more data and learn about the, super training and just learn the nerdy shit. Right. And honestly, I'm at a point now where I'm like, I haven't picked up that stuff in such a long time because I'm studying communication, how to listen better, how to ask better questions, how to literally just become a better leader and mentor. But also with my coaches, it's like the technical stuff we're always going to add layers to, but at a certain point, your ROI is just not going to be there.
That's precisely it, and I think that becomes a challenge. Another challenge professionally for a lot of personal trainers is if they don't make the flip and start getting interested in that, you're always going to be wanting further levels of challenge, which is going to trend towards more complexity. And at a certain point, it starts to actually, I think, hurt the client, right? Because if the trainer is so interested in training, and particularly if they're a Gen Pop person, and they are just down the rabbit hole of the 3-letter acronyms, they're down the rabbit and they're reading Zatskiorski. And listen, like that's all well and good. But at a certain point, it's like Dan John 101. It's like the best coaches just don't get bored of coaching a deadlift. But in practice, that's very hard to do, right? Like most people are going to get bored of coaching a really good push-up at a certain point. So what I have seen to be a sustainable path forward for a lot of coaches is what you will never really get bored of and will always, I think, continue to garner more and more return is the interpersonal behavior change piece, right? Because the more you go into that, after a certain point, and I know we've talked a lot in our chat today about, our shared training nerdery. But at a certain point, there probably is like, you're technically proficient enough, right? At this point, to go even deeper down the rabbit hole is going to start to be about your interests and your agenda, not narrow the client. Whereas if you continue to decide, okay, not to say that you're like, oh, I'm done, I don't need to learn anymore, right? Because of course we can always learn. But at a certain point, further results for you as a professional, in regards to both finances, but also impact on the client, are going to likely come from doubling down on communication, listening, coaching, all the things that, again, they seem soft, but they're not really soft. They're just like, they're not bones. So it's a little harder to talk about. Yeah. It's not less mathy.
So one last note on the online coaching thing, and I'm not completely in congruence with my partner here, is that I'm actually ready to launch a virtual coaching aspect of my business myself, and it's
Love it.
geared it's geared specifically, ironically, to what you said, Mark. It's a subsegment of that population who, look, they're already working out, they're already doing all this, they have a history, they have a background, and they're not there to get a trainer like some people get a trainer so they can get you to work out. I'm there for the people that are already working out, they just don't know what to do, and they just need me to put the pieces together for them. And so there's that component. And one of the things that we keep
100%.
saying, and the one things that we keep saying to trainers that we're coaching and trying to teach them, because we're teaching program design, is to teach them from a career aspect, is to understand that what online training does, and this, to come full circle, may actually elevate the game to a certain extent, is that if in the old days when we started, it was like you just had to be better than the trainer down the street. And where you are in Manhattan, in Manhattan, that means there's 75 trainers from one block to the next. But even still, all you had to be better is the people in the immediate area that you're competing with. Well, now, once I hang my virtual shingle out there, I got to be better than everybody, because if I can now spend my dollars with any coach in the world, and now you're the guy with the weekend certification, you got to pick out, and someone's going to put their hard-earned money towards, they can pick you, or they could pick me, or Charlie Weingroff, or some of these people who are going to blow you away. So you better up your game, because if I can pick anybody, I don't need to just go to the guy in the corner. If I can pick anybody in the world, you better be top shelf.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, it's so much more opportunity and so much more competition. It's interesting to hear the two of you sort of taking counters on that, because that, for me, I do think is kind of the interesting thing we've sort of learned as a society post-COVID, is what makes it a little challenging now is a lot of people became clear, like, oh, I don't like going to a place to work. I'd rather just sit behind my keyboard and do things. And then other people are like, I'd rather kill myself than just sit behind my keyboard. I need to go to a place and be around people and leave my house, right? So I very much agree with your point that I think like the stakes get so much higher there. I think the other thing that I would highlight for listeners is also true is the fulfillment will matter, and your sales and marketing are going to get way more important. And it's hard to run sales and marketing for a gym just because you have a geographic constraint, but whoa boy, then the niches do start to matter. And my experience, again, I don't pretend to be an expert in that world, is getting hyper specific about a niche if you're going online begins to really, really, really matter. Because the online trainers, by and large, you're also competing against the most sophisticated sales and marketing, like absolute killer ninjas out there. Now, the good news is you don't need everybody, right? Depending on, how much you need to live, how many clients you want, what your price point is. I think that's the other piece of this too. Part of what makes online training so attractive for individuals, you don't have the overhead, right? Like Mike and I have overhead. You know what I mean? It's like, I got some stakes up there, right? Depending on your personal situation, you might be doing like 93% margins. You got like a virtual assistant and you're like paying for an app or two. So, yeah, I think I hope everyone listening, I know they're listening to this podcast, they're already digging in, making sure you're really good at the way you're fulfilling. And I would invite you to make sure that you take the sales and marketing piece seriously too, right? Get them in the door and then service the hell out of them.
All right. So as we sort of come to a close here, what do you got coming on in the next year? What do we got going on in 2024?
Oh boy. Yeah, it's funny. You were reflecting on, again, your parallel experience. The thing that's been maybe a little interesting, it's a little context for what's going on now and I foresee up in this year ahead, is, I am still passionate about MFF. I still have an important role at MFF, and I run remotely because for me, I was one of those people discovered, like, I want to be behind my keyboard. I like this the most. I like to have the meetings, but for me, I also love working from home. That's the right fit for me. And I know, again, for a certain type of person, that's like, they're like, get me out of here. I'm like, nope, I like just puttering around home all day long. It's good for me. So, MFF, still loving it. A lot of what's been very gratifying for me lately is I have a team of some really killer people that more and more really running the show over there. So I'll look forward to continuing to mentor and develop them, and probably step back even a little bit further operationally. And then I'll still be very involved in the marketing piece and in the high level of strategy. But I think MFF, a lot of the focus is really supporting that team, because I know the plan there ultimately is try to open up some more locations in the small group model. Related to that, I mentioned I have the first of what I hope to be several locations of Alloy Small Group Personal Training, which is a new emerging small group fitness franchise run by Rick Mayo. And I will continue to work on that business. Similarly, in not precisely an operational role, I have a business partner who's on the ground, who's building out those teams and making that happen. So I'll continue to work on that. But the real focus these days for me is business for unicorns, which is working with gym owners to help them create more income, more impact, and more freedom. Like, I think about the gym business all day long, every day. I like to think I have an unusual professional skill set between, running Mark Fisher Fitness for so many years and now being a franchisee, another model, and opening up locations in other markets that are not in New York City. And then, of course, just working with gym owners now for several years. I'm just obsessed with the opportunity of this industry. I'm obsessed with our mission and the way we can impact people's lives. It feels so good to work with businesses where there's such a clear one-to-one map to, unless you're doing something really dodgy, but there's a one-to-one map between the business's success and doing really good things for people. I'm sure there are out people that are great at helping you coach it. You run, I don't know, an oil business, and I love you. If you run an oil business, I just told you, I love you. I don't think I'd be super on fire to help you get more oil or whatever, but I love helping gym owners. And also it's because it's you're always looking to, I think, take care of yourself 5 years ago, because that's the way for me, it feels like it. So I would just say that that's a lot of my interest is how do we keep making that business better so we're getting better, faster results for gym owners, particularly because our crew tends to be, as it's probably not surprising as per the podcast, tends to be kind of like the nerdy nerds. And I mean that in a good way, right? Like the friendly, nerdy nerds are really into training, they really have a good product. Like you mentioned before, Pete Dupuis, Eric Cressy, no slouches. So that's been fun too, is we've now got a decent percentage of people we work with in the sports performance world. And, just supporting my training nerds, looking to have a business that actually works for them and for their family and for their long-term professional and financial goals, and are able to achieve it by really making good positive impact on people with good training, good customer service. Yeah, I'm on fire about it. I love it. I love it.
Good stuff, man. Well, kudos on everything you've been able to do and what you continue to do. And we appreciate you and appreciate certainly your time and coming on and sharing it with us. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolute honor.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you for listening as well. And this has been the Principles of Performance podcast. Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.